Hello everyone, welcome to the Eternal Card Breakdown. We are talking about the new promo today, Yorja, the Tailkeeper, a 2-cost, 1/3 that says when one or more units are transformed, Yorja gets +1/+1, as well as Mastery 6, transform an enemy unit into a unit that costs 2 less, and one of your other units into a unit that costs 2 more. Mastery-wise, the card is pretty good if you can get the mastery off on it. Obviously, you need transform effects for Yorja to be even remotely relevant. 1/3 is not a relevant stat line in even expeditions, I feel. So, like, this card really couldn't be played as a regular vanilla card without transform effects helping it out. That's kind of a point against it in terms of all the value that it provides, but the thing this card does do is provide something of a critical mass for transform decks, which are viable in both Expedition and Ranked right now. We have Vargo's Pelt in both formats, and also a large number of interesting unstable form effects, including Mass Polymorph, and a number of other extremely fun toys like Substitute. There are some really interesting cards that can basically make self-transformation a really interesting option, as well as making stuff like Polymorph and Linray's Edict a little bit more interesting as well. So like Edict of Linray, I believe it's called. So yeah, like anything where you are basically just using your transformation as removal, something like Regression or Edict of Linray or Polymorph or even Unstable Form, Yorja is going to get bigger pretty quickly. And in an aggressive format, if you're trying to play very, very aggressively with Unstable Form, then Yorja gets to goes up from a 2/3 to a 3/5 to a 4/6, which at 4/6 you're starting to get pretty interesting, and then continues to be pretty interesting on its own. The main issue I think here is that like the card does not synergize well with some of the other polymorph effects. Like one of the big reasons to run something like Vargo's Pelt is so that you can get some extra value out of cards like Mass Polymorph and the Flight of Makar, which is the one that transforms everything into flying ravens. Yorja doesn't synergize super well with either of those, since basically you aren't going to get Yorja a +1/+1 bonus. She'll just turn into a larger 3-drop, which admittedly will be a little bit better than whatever she's currently playing with. So a little bit trickier to run in some of those situations, and certainly gives you a little pause as to what all decks that she can be run in. But she can be played with Sodi's Spellshaper, which equivocates. She can be played with Equivocate itself, which is an extremely powerful and tempo-relevant card. Both of those cards immediately allow for some interesting competitive options if you're playing around with the card. Overall, I think this card is not heavily pushed for a Transform card, but it is really interesting in Expedition Transform, and that's probably where it's most likely going to lie pretty strongly. If you're playing with Substitute, Sodi Spellshaper, Yorja the Tailkeeper, Vargo's Pelt, and possibly even some Mass Polymorphs or Flight of Makars if you're feeling like it, but mostly just like Edict of Linray, something like Blitrock, which is pretty likely to get some sort of Transform effect, and just general removal along those lines, then this card tends to get a lot more ridiculous a lot faster, and also is very likely to hit that Mastery 6, which means that not only are you shutting down some of your opponent's Mastery stuff, which is a pretty big deal. A lot of the really good decks right now run very heavy Masteries, or they run very cheap units that tend to try to get bigger, such as Slumbering Stone, you have Nahid's Faithful, you have Teething Whelp, you have Verit. All of those cards are very vulnerable to transform effects that are cheap, so if you can do something very simple to it, and then get a lot of a benefit out of it, and then also use Yorja to transform another Mastery card later on, you're getting a decent amount of value there. So I think there's some potential for this card to actually shake up the meta a little bit in the sort of blue area. It's an unusual card, but overall, I would say that power level wise, it's not particularly strong. There's not a lot going on with it except for playing very deep into those transformation strategies. And if you are getting those done, then maybe you get some benefits out of it. But I would say that the really big restriction on Yorja the Tailkeeper is that Mastery 6. That number is just a little too high for what it wants to do. If that were like a Mastery 4 or something along those lines, this card could pretty easily get to the masteries that it wants to get to. But basically, like, you have to transform something several times to even get a 2-turn clock on your mastery, whereas many other decks are doing that exact same thing with something like Jack's Knife or something along those lines. Like Substitute Jack's Knife will get you there, but at that point you're turning one of your own units into a large dinosaur, which may or may not be good for you, and then you're also putting a Jack's Knife on Yorja, so like it's just really really awkward. Mastery 5 might be a little bit more attainable, but obviously like anything that is then accessible with Jack's Knife gets to be kind of irritating because it's the same sort of repetitive play pattern. So I think that what Yorja really needs is maybe like an extra point on stats. 2-3 again is not great either, so I can see why there's like some interesting things going on with like the overall design of it. Yeah, the card is like an unusual shaman. The storyline of her is basically that she is like a lore keeper for the Zoltan Empire. She knows a lot about a lot of different things. There's some cool stuff in the lore document if you want to like take a look at it. Like generally just like going out and basically like looking at the whole Nash storyline tells you a couple of interesting things about both Zolta and about Miria, including the fact that gunslingers are somewhat rare and generally restricted to anyone who can afford the stone pattern, which I think is always a really cool trick. I'm more interested in Mirian lore than I am in Zoltan lore at the moment, but yeah, Yorja's kind of unusual. She's got a fascinating design and a couple of interesting things going on with her, and I think the transform decks are really really fun. I would say this card is almost strictly in the casual realm, but we're definitely going to build some fun decks with her, and like if you can actually get that going, then yeah, there's a lot to be said about what the card can do. Overall, I don't know. I'm not sure what this card needs. I feel like maybe like an extra point of health would be wild. Like if it were Scaly Gruen level, then it could get very powerful very fast. The mastery is just like kind of awkward. The stat line's kind of awkward. The transform effects are already kind of awkward. So you've got like a bunch of different things that are stacking on top of each other to be pretty awkward together. But at least the card does have some fun with Sodi Spellshaper in like just many different formats. Like as a 2-drop, this card is not even unreasonable in like an Elysian aggro deck if you're playing around with a decent amount of transform effects to get yourself that a little bit of extra aggro. But trickiness, hard to really say if you could do something very interesting that's also competitive. If you were going to go that route, I think my bet would be on Lumen Shepherd, Sodi Spellshaper, Substitute, and like sort of just trying to make a really, really aggressive deck out of a bunch of very cheap effects. That might be something that could work in Expedition. Something worth giving it a shot. This card did actually come out with a there was like a leak or something along those lines where there was a preview card on Twitch that was a 4-cost 2/2, and it was the same name, so it's just like a different design for the card, and it had like basically the ability of, it was a 2/2 Exalted, and it drew a hero of your choice from your deck for 4. I think that card would have been really irritating, but it would have been a lot stronger too, so take it that what you will. Maybe we'll see that design again in the future on some other card. It could be kind of neat. It's certainly an unusual Exalted card, and the idea of grabbing like heroes specifically is really, really cool. I would like to see that card in a heroes format. At this point, I'm kind of rooting for like Throne format to just sort of morph into a hero type format or something along those lines. So that would be really, really interesting. But yeah, what we've got here is a really big Benny for transform cards, and man, Transform Tribal is really interesting. Like, there's a lot of fun stuff there, so I'm actually really glad to see this promo. I think it's a good promo. I think it's a good design. I think that it gives you an exciting thing to play with, and that's pretty cool. There is a Precon deck that contains premium copies of the card. If you buy it, you can have access to all 4 of the premiums ahead of time, as opposed to just having one of. I've lamented many times how often that you just can't play the one copy of the Yorja that you get, but I'm also like a little skeptical of like that deck in terms of value. Like, it's 500 for 4 premium copies of a card that you're gonna get for free anyways, and then like I think 1 to 2 extra rares, one of which is good. You get Sodi Spellshaper in there, so it's a little bit behind on what kind of cost it is, but it's not too bad. So like maybe if you're interested in Yorja and you want like a really fancy copy of it, it might be worth picking it up. We certainly did grab it because we want to build some crazy nonsense with it, but we'll see if we continue to pick up those decks in the future, because that's an unusual deal and hard to say if it's good or not. That's basically everything on Yorja the Tailkeeper, but yeah, there's a lot to talk about, and like Eternal's just continuing to be really, really impressive. We've been happy with the Expedition meta as of late. We're currently playing for our Throne Mastery, which will be our 4th premium legendary of the month. all of the formats are feeling pretty good right now. Like Throne is definitely still in the weakest shape, just because Throne is like there's just no fixing Throne. I think at this point it's just getting too big. But like there's a lot of interesting stuff happening overall, and like the game is as fun as it has ever been. So I urge people to pick it up. It's really cool. And that's everything. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you with more Eternal highlights and brews and shenanigans in the future. Bye.